There comes a moment when something inside you quietly shifts, almost imperceptibly. It's not loud, not dramatic, just a soft realization that something isn't working anymore. You feel it before you can name it, like a current that changes direction beneath still water. And you don't announce it, you don't tell anyone. You just know. You've smiled too much when you wanted to cry. You've said, "It's fine," when your chest was breaking. You've justified things that never deserved justification. And suddenly, without warning, you reach a point where your soul whispers, "No more." You start to see that not all the pain you've carried came from what others did to you. Some of it came from how much you allowed, how often you gave people permission to cross lines you never even drew, how much of yourself you gave away just to keep the peace, to be liked, to be seen as good. It's a brutal clarity, the kind that doesn't destroy you, but it does make you question everything. I remember the first time I felt that shift. I was standing in a room full of people, laughing, nodding, performing the small talk everyone expects, and suddenly, I wasn't there. Not really. I felt like I was watching myself from somewhere outside, smiling, responding, agreeing, but completely absent. My body was there, but my soul had already walked out the door. That's when I realized I had been performing acceptance, not living authenticity. No one teaches you how to come back from that kind of self-abandonment. No one tells you how to stop explaining yourself to people who never tried to understand you. We grow up believing that being available, open, agreeable, and kind is the ultimate virtue. Be nice, they say, be understanding. And so we bend, we accommodate. We make space for everyone except ourselves. And one day you look around and realize everyone has access to you except you. It's strange, isn't it? The more you say yes, the less you're respected. The more you try to explain, the less you're heard. The more you forgive, the more they test you. People don't admire infinite accessibility, they exploit it. And deep down, you feel it. You feel how each little compromise steals a piece of your peace. How each time you silence your truth to keep someone comfortable, a small part of you disappears. I used to think strength meant enduring everything, being the calm one, the understanding one, the one who doesn't walk away. But endurance without boundaries isn't strength. It's slow erosion. It's spiritual decay disguised as loyalty. And when that realization hits, it doesn't come with anger. It comes with grief. Grief for all the versions of you that smiled when you wanted to scream. Grief for the you who thought being loved meant being endlessly available. Something begins to grow out of that grief, though. A seed. Tiny but real. It's not born from rebellion or pride. It's born from exhaustion. A silent promise takes shape inside you. Never again will I betray myself just to be accepted. It's not a dramatic vow, it's a quiet, steady one, like a whisper that says, "I'm coming home." And it's hard at first, because when you've spent a lifetime being reachable, setting distance feels cruel. You'll question yourself, am I becoming cold? Am I pushing people away? But slowly, you begin to understand. It's not about shutting people out. It's about finally letting yourself in. You start noticing things differently. You see how people test your limits, how they interpret your silence as invitation, your kindness as weakness. And for the first time, instead of reacting, you observe. You feel the old reflex rise, the urge to explain, to fix, to soften, but something stops you. That new part of you, the one that's been quietly growing, whispers, "Wait, you don't have to respond." It's uncomfortable, this new silence. It burns at first. You'll want to fill it with words, reassurance, justification, but every time you choose not to, you reclaim something. You take back a piece of your power. You start to see that not everything deserves your energy. Not every opinion needs your defense. Not every chaos deserves your attention. And in that space, Where reaction used to live, you begin to feel peace. Not the soft, polite kind of peace, but a grounded one. The kind that says, I know who I am, even if you don't understand. You start realizing that self-respect isn't built through explanation. It's built through silence, through staying centered even when others don't get it. There's a quiet revolution happening inside you. No one else can see it. You still show up to work, answer messages, laugh with friends, but the way you exist begins to change. You stop giving people access to your emotions so easily. You stop feeling guilty for taking space. You begin to understand that you don't owe anyone a version of yourself that costs you your peace. It's strange how something as invisible as a boundary can feel so liberating. You start to walk differently, not with arrogance, but with calm certainty. The world hasn't changed, but you have. The same noise, the same demands, the same people, but they don't touch you in the same way anymore. You've stopped living like a button everyone can press. You've become something else, something deeper, quieter, untouchable. And maybe for the first time in your life, you're not trying to be understood. You're just trying to be. It's strange how quickly people notice when you start pulling your energy back. They don't always understand it, but they feel it. The silence unsettles them. Your sudden absence from the endless conversations, the polite smiles, the predictable yes. It disrupts the pattern they've come to rely on. At first, they ask if something's wrong. Then they get defensive. You've changed, they say, as if that's an accusation. And maybe they're right. Maybe you have. But maybe that's the point. We're raised to be reachable, to answer quickly, to smile even when we don't want to explain ourselves just so no one misunderstands us. We call it kindness. We call it empathy. But beneath all that conditioning lies fear. Fear of being seen as rude, distant, or selfish. So we stretch ourselves thin. We reply when we're exhausted. We listen when we're empty. And we offer compassion to people who drain it dry. It's not generosity anymore. It's survival disguised as virtue. I think Jung was right when he said, "What you accept changes you. What you deny controls you." Because when you accept everything, every demand, every conversation, every emotional invitation, you lose track of who you are. You start reacting to life instead of living it. You become a mirror reflecting everyone else's needs, but forgetting your own face. And when you finally start pulling away, even a little, you realize how much you've given without measure. You notice how the world loves people who are easy to reach, but not necessarily easy to respect. The truth hits you quietly one day. Being available doesn't make you kind. It makes you accessible. And accessibility without discernment is self-erasure. The realization hurts, because it forces you to see how many times you've tolerated disrespect just to keep a connection. How often you've smiled through manipulation and called it patience. How you've mistaken constant giving for strength. But strength isn't how much you can carry. It's knowing when to put it down. And so, you begin the work of reclaiming your time, your energy, your attention. You start asking yourself questions you never dared to before. Does this conversation feed my spirit? Does this person respect my presence? Or do they just need my reaction? Does this situation deserve my peace? And more often than not, the answer is no. That's when the old guilt comes knocking. You'll hear its voice, soft but persistent. You're being selfish. You're pushing people away. You're making things awkward. But here's what no one tells you. Guilt is often the shadow of your old self dying, the self that existed to please, to fix, to soothe others at the expense of your own sanity. It's not the voice of truth, it's the echo of your conditioning. When you start listening to silence instead of guilt, something begins to shift. You notice that peace doesn't come from pleasing people. It comes from no longer betraying yourself to please them. You stop chasing validation because you realize that anyone who only values you when you're convenient doesn't value you at all. At first, this new boundary feels lonely. You'll miss the noise, the constant messages, the constant explanations, the constant pull. But then, in that quiet, something miraculous happens. You meet yourself again. The part of you that doesn't perform, the one that doesn't need to be understood, the one who isn't begging for space. She's creating it. And as that space expands, you start seeing the world differently. You stop reacting to every tone, every text, every subtle jab. You start choosing where to place your energy, deliberately, wisely. You start noticing how much power exists in stillness. And that power doesn't make you cold, it makes you clear. To be unreachable isn't to shut people out. It's to live in such alignment that nothing external can control your inner state. It's to move through life with a kind of calm defiance, a refusal to let chaos dictate your peace. And when you reach that place, you realize that presence is not about being everywhere. It's about being so deeply rooted in yourself that wherever you are whole. There's something deeply unsettling about realizing how much of your life has been lived on autopilot. You start to see all the moments when you weren't really choosing, you were reacting. Every decision colored by fear of being left out, fear of losing someone, fear of disappointing. It's as if your entire emotional landscape was built on the hope that if you gave enough, proved enough, explained enough, you'd finally feel safe. But safety that depends on others' approval is just another kind of cage. When you finally step back, when you stop rushing to fix or to please, it's jarring at first. The silence feels too wide, the stillness too heavy. You're so used to running on adrenaline, constantly responding, constantly adjusting, that peace feels foreign. It's uncomfortable to not be needed. It's even more uncomfortable to not need. But that's the moment when something inside you starts to grow. Sovereignty. Not the kind that seeks power over others, but the quiet power of self-possession. You start noticing people differently. The ones who thrive on your constant attention suddenly seem smaller, almost transparent. You see their patterns clearly. The subtle manipulation, the guilt-tripping, the way they pull at your empathy like it's an endless rope. And for the first time, you don't take the bait. You don't explain. You don't justify. You just stop. Not out of resentment, but because you finally understand that not every invitation to chaos deserves an RSVP. The shift is internal. You begin filtering everything through a new question. Does this align with my peace? That one question changes everything. Conversations you used to entertain feel heavy now. Situations you used to tolerate suddenly feel impossible to stay in. You realize that your silence doesn't need to be explained. It's not avoidance, it's clarity. Being unreachable isn't about indifference. It's about intentional presence. You stop scattering your energy everywhere, and you start channeling it inward. You stop reacting to every vibration around you, and you begin responding only to what resonates with your truth. It's a form of emotional dominion, knowing that your energy is sacred and not everyone gets access to it. And the world starts to test you. It always does. The moment you reclaim your boundaries, the universe sends you reminders of the old you. People who once fed off your availability will suddenly demand explanations. They'll accuse you of changing. Some will try to provoke you, to pull you back into the same emotional loops that once defined your relationships. But this time, you won't bite, because peace has a taste. Once you've felt it, you can't go back to chaos willingly. There's beauty in that kind of restraint. You learn to hold your emotions with grace instead of spilling them everywhere. You learn that you don't owe your reaction to anyone, no matter how loud their provocation. You learn that your calm is not weakness, it's precision. The ability to choose where your energy goes is the truest form of freedom. You start noticing how quiet confidence feels. You enter a room and don't feel the need to fill the silence. You listen more, you observe. You realize that real presence doesn't demand attention. It commands it effortlessly. There's power in not explaining, in letting your stillness speak louder than your words ever could. But it's not easy. There are nights when you feel the ache of distance. When you question if you've become too detached, too guarded, that's when you have to remind yourself, this isn't withdrawal, it's refinement. You're not losing touch with life. You're learning to touch it without losing yourself. And that's the essence of emotional maturity. Not reacting to prove you care, not explaining to prove you're good, not engaging to prove your worth. It's knowing that peace doesn't need witnesses. It just needs protection. One day, someone will ask you why you're so calm now, why things don't seem to bother you like they used to, and you'll smile, not out of pride, but out of understanding, because they'll never know the storms you had to quiet inside yourself to arrive here. They'll never know the noise you had to unlearn. What they'll see as distance is really alignment. What they'll call indifference is really self-respect. And the person you used to be, the one who over-explained, overgave, overreacted, will look back at you from memory with quiet gratitude, whispering, "Finally, you stopped running." There's a strange ache that comes with clarity. It doesn't arrive all at once. It seeps in, moment by moment, like dawn filtering through a half-open curtain. You start remembering all the times you said yes when you wanted to say no, all the times you laughed at jokes that hurt you, accepted apologies that meant nothing, stayed silent just to keep the peace. The realization doesn't hit like a wave. It burns slow. And somewhere between the regret and the relief, you begin to understand. The person who betrayed you the most was often yourself. It's not a comfortable truth. You want to blame others, the manipulative friend, the selfish partner, the emotionally absent parent. But when the noise fades, when there's no one left to project on, you're forced to look inward. You see how deeply you feared being left behind, how much of your identity was built around being needed, around being useful. You start to realize that people didn't take from you because they were cruel. They took because you never learned how to say, enough. The pain that follows is sacred. It's the kind that transforms you, if you let it. You begin to grieve not just what happened to you, but who you were while it happened. The version of you that believed love had to be earned. The version that thought silence was strength. The version that kept showing up for people who never showed up for you. There's something holy in mourning your own innocence. Not because you lost it, but because you outgrew it. You start noticing how that grief changes your relationship with the world. You no longer rush to fill every silence or explain every emotion. You begin to let things breathe. When someone misunderstands you now, you don't chase after them with clarifications. You simply let them misunderstand, because you've learned that peace is worth more than being right. This is the stage where solitude becomes your teacher. You stop running from it. The quiet that once felt unbearable now feels necessary, a place to rebuild, to listen, to remember who you were before the world told you who to be. You start hearing your own voice again. At first, it's timid, uncertain, but with time, it grows steady. It stops asking for permission. It begins to sound like truth, and truth, real truth, has a way of rearranging everything. It doesn't make you bitter. It makes you selective. You begin to choose differently. You no longer go where you're merely tolerated. You don't chase what confuses you. You stop trying to fix people who are comfortable in their brokenness. It's not coldness, it's maturity. It's the moment you realize that compassion without boundaries is self-destruction dressed as virtue. The hardest part is that this transformation isn't glamorous. It's not a montage of serene mornings and confident smiles. It's messy. It's crying in silence because you're mourning the old you while learning to love the new one. It's sitting in the discomfort of not being understood. It's saying no and feeling your heart race, but saying it anyway. It's building a life that finally feels aligned with your soul, one boundary at a time. There's a quote I once read that said, "We don't heal to become invincible. We heal to become whole." That line has stayed with me because wholeness isn't about perfection. It's about integration, holding your light and your shadow in the same breath without shame. It's the day you stop saying, "I'm fine," when you're not. It's admitting that you were complicit in your own exhaustion, but also forgiving yourself for it. And as that forgiveness seeps in, the heaviness begins to lift. Slowly, subtly, you start to feel grounded again. You begin to understand that peace isn't a place you arrive at. It's a practice. It's in how you breathe when provoked, how you stay when it's real, how you leave when it's not. One day you wake up and realize that you're not angry anymore. Not at them, not at yourself. There's just space. Wide, quiet, unexplainable space. You don't need to prove your worth or justify your choices. You're not craving validation, you're craving truth. You start to see beauty in being misunderstood because it means you've stopped performing. That's when you understand what real liberation feels like. It's not fireworks, it's not dramatic closure. It's the gentle exhale after years of holding your breath. It's waking up one morning and realizing that nothing outside of you has changed, but everything inside of you has. You start to realize that most of the battles you fought were never against other people. They were against your own impulses, the need to respond, the need to be understood, the need to prove something. You spent so much of your life trying to win invisible arguments in your head, explaining yourself to people who had already made up their minds. It's exhausting, isn't it? How much energy we give to trying to be seen by those who are blind on purpose. The first time you choose not to react, it feels wrong. You can feel the words pressing against your chest, begging to escape. Your ego wants justice, your pride wants the last word, your pain wants acknowledgement. But then something stronger appears. A quiet knowing that says, "Don't waste yourself here." It's such a subtle shift, but it changes everything. You take a breath. You let the silence do the talking. And for the first time, you realize that not reacting isn't weakness. It's wisdom. You begin to see how predictable you once were, how easily people could provoke you, how quickly they learned which buttons to press. You start to notice how control was never about domination. It was about your reactivity. Every time you exploded, every time you over-explained, every time you defended yourself to someone uninterested in understanding, you handed them a piece of your peace. You showed them where your wounds lived, and they learned how to find them. But now you see the trap. You begin to understand that reaction reveals you, while restraint refines you. The more you observe, the more you realize how chaotic the world becomes when you stop feeding it your energy. People who used to draw power from your emotional availability begin to lose interest. The ones who wanted drama start to find your calm intolerable. Your silence becomes unsettling because it's no longer submission, it's control. It's not easy. The ego hates silence. It equates it with defeat. But slowly you start to experience a different kind of satisfaction. The kind that comes from watching chaos burn out without your participation. You start to realize that peace isn't passive. It's active, intentional, even fierce. It's saying, "I could respond, but I choose not to." It's recognizing that not every fight deserves your fire. There's a deep beauty in that kind of composure. It's not numbness. It's precision. You're not detached because you don't feel. You're detached because you finally understand the cost of reacting to everything that moves you. You begin to see how much of your life was spent in defense mode, explaining your heart to people who never truly wanted to hear it. Now you're learning the art of conserving your energy, of letting silence protect what explanation used to destroy. The world doesn't know what to do with someone who doesn't flinch. They'll call you distant, arrogant, mysterious. But what they're really seeing is a person who no longer dances to the tune of other people's chaos. You've stopped giving everyone a map to your emotions. You've stopped being an open door to every storm. And that makes you powerful in a way that no one can easily define. Still, there are moments when it hurts. You'll want to speak, you'll want to defend yourself, you'll want to tell your side of the story. But then you'll remember, truth doesn't need defending. It stands on its own, quietly, patiently, and when you let the noise pass, the truth always remains. You'll notice that your silence changes things. It's not just an absence of words. It's an energy. It commands attention without seeking it. People begin to think before they speak to you. They measure their tone. They sense that you are not someone to be provoked easily anymore. And that's because you've become something rare, emotionally grounded. It's not that you've stopped feeling. You still feel everything. You just no longer let every feeling pull you out of alignment. You've learned the difference between emotion and reaction, between presence and performance. You've learned that calm doesn't mean nothing is happening. It means everything is happening inside you, just under your control. So when someone tries to bait you now, you simply breathe. You choose stillness. You choose not to participate in the game, because you finally understand that peace isn't about avoiding storms. It's about learning to remain unmoved when they come. And in that quiet, steady place, you discover something extraordinary. You don't need to win anymore. You just need to stay centered. That's the real victory. Letting go sounds so simple, doesn't it? Two small words that carry the weight of an entire lifetime. Everyone tells you it's the path to peace. Just release it. Move on. Don't look back. But they never tell you how much it hurts. They don't tell you that letting go feels like dying a little. Because in some way, it is. You're saying goodbye not only to a person or a situation, but to a version of yourself that existed within it. There's this quiet moment that comes before you finally let go. The moment of hesitation. The one that whispers, maybe if I try a little harder. You remember all the good parts, all the almosts, all the what-ifs. Your heart clings to the possibility that things could go back to how they were, but deep down, you know the feeling has already shifted. You know the laughter doesn't sound the same. You know you're the only one still reaching across a gap that's grown too wide. It's strange how the soul can feel both heavy and hollow at once. You wake up and the world looks the same, but something inside you has collapsed. The illusion you've been holding on to finally breaks. And what's left isn't relief. Not yet. It's emptiness. The space where you used to pour your love, your explanations, your effort. Now just silence. You'll want to fill it. You'll want to run back to the familiar ache because pain, at least, gives you something to hold. But don't. Stay there. Stay in the emptiness. That's where the truth begins to unfold. You start to see that letting go isn't the end of something. It's the beginning of honesty. It's admitting that no amount of trying will make someone understand you if they don't want to. It's realizing that you can't keep carrying relationships that only exist because you refuse to drop them. It's facing the terrifying freedom of not having anything left to fix, and in that freedom, you start to breathe again. Not the shallow breaths of survival, but deep, slow breaths that taste like possibility. You begin to understand that holding on was never strength. It was fear. Fear of the unknown, fear of emptiness, fear of being alone. But the longer you hold on to what's already gone, the more you block what's meant to arrive. You start asking yourself different questions now, not How do I keep this alive? But what am I making space for by releasing it? It shifts everything. You begin to see that loss isn't punishment, it's preparation. It's life clearing room for something truer, quieter, more aligned with who you're becoming. And still, there are moments when it hurts, when you see their name, when an old song plays, when a memory sneaks in uninvited. But instead of resisting it, you let the ache pass through you. You stop fighting the pain, and in doing so, it begins to soften. It's not that it disappears, it just stops defining you. One night, you'll catch yourself smiling at the thought of what once broke you. You'll realize that you don't want it back anymore. You'll feel gratitude, not for what it was, but for what it taught you, for the strength it forced you to build, for the patience it carved into your heart, for the clarity it left behind. That's when you'll understand that letting go was never about losing someone else. It was about finding yourself again. You'll see how many versions of you were trapped inside those attachments. The fixer, the pleaser, the one who waited for reciprocity that never came. And with each goodbye, you release a weight you didn't even know you were carrying. The load gets lighter. The air gets clearer. The silence starts to sound like peace. And slowly, you realize that you no longer need closure. You no longer need apologies. You no longer need to be seen by the ones who couldn't meet you. You've outgrown the story that required their validation. You're no longer surviving. You're beginning again. Letting go doesn't make you heartless. It makes you honest. It's saying, I still care, but I care about myself more. It's understanding that love can exist without attachment, and that walking away can be the most faithful act of love to yourself. You start to see how everything you release creates space for something better, not necessarily someone new, but a new way of being. You stop clinging to the idea of how things should be and start living in what is. And from that place, life begins to move differently, quieter, truer, freer. It's not about forgetting, it's about forgiving, not them, but you. Forgiving yourself for staying too long, for giving too much, for mistaking endurance for loyalty. And once you do, the pain that used to define you transforms into peace that protects you. That's the real power of letting go. Not the act itself, but who you become because of it. It happens quietly, almost without warning. That moment when you realize how much lighter life feels. Not because everything has become easier, but because you've stopped trying to hold what was never yours to carry. You wake up one morning and notice that the constant noise in your head has faded. The overthinking, the imaginary arguments, the endless attempts to make sense of others, gone. In their place, there's stillness, a strange, sacred kind of stillness. You begin to see that not everyone deserves access to you. Not everyone should be allowed to walk freely through your inner world. For too long, you handed out emotional keys to anyone who smiled kindly or showed interest. You mistook curiosity for care, validation for love, presence for connection, and every time someone left, they took a little piece of you with them. But now you've changed the locks. Access is no longer automatic. Your attention has become something sacred, selective, deliberate, intentional. At first, it feels almost selfish. You hear the echoes of your old conditioning. Be available, be kind, be there for everyone. But kindness without boundaries is cruelty to yourself. You begin to understand that presence doesn't mean constant availability. Being there for others is only noble when you're not abandoning yourself in the process. There's a quiet dignity in saying, not now, or this doesn't deserve my energy. People sense it. They might not understand it, but they feel the shift. You're calmer now, less reactive. You don't rush to reply, don't chase after explanations, don't get pulled into emotional storms. You've stopped being predictable. And that makes you powerful. There's something magnetic about your stillness, something unsettling about your silence. It's not distance, it's discernment. The world feels your steadiness, and it responds differently to you because of it. It's in the small things, the way you no longer answer every message immediately, the way you take a breath before responding, the way you choose peace over participation in chaos. You begin to realize that silence isn't empty. It's full of power, intention, and self-respect. Each pause is a declaration. My energy is precious. My peace is non-negotiable. The funny thing is, people start treating you differently, not because you've demanded respect, but because you've embodied it. You no longer explain your worth. You express it through your boundaries. You don't argue for your value. You live it quietly, and in doing so, you attract a different kind of person. Those who come near now feel the weight of your presence. They tread softly. They listen more, because your calm commands it. You also begin to notice who fades away. The ones who only valued you for your compliance. The ones who thrived on your endless availability. The ones who loved your light but never wanted to face their own shadow. They start to disappear, and instead of chasing after them, you let them go. Because you finally understand that absence isn't always loss. Sometimes it's alignment. This new version of you doesn't chase validation. You don't perform anymore. You don't try to prove that you're good, kind, or enough. You just are. There's a certain kind of confidence that comes from no longer being reactive. You begin to move through the world like someone who knows they belong, not because others say so, but because you finally say it to yourself. You start making peace with being misunderstood. You no longer waste your breath on people determined to misread your silence as arrogance or your boundaries as rejection. You know now that your stillness isn't a wall. It's a sanctuary. Not everyone is meant to enter. Not everyone has earned the right to hear your truth. And in this selective presence, life starts to bloom again. You find yourself laughing more, not because everything is perfect, but because you're no longer trying to control what isn't. You start seeing beauty in simplicity, in long pauses, quiet mornings, unfinished conversations. You begin to experience a kind of freedom that doesn't need to announce itself. It just exists, deep, steady, grounded. People often think being unreachable means being detached, but it's the opposite. It means being so deeply rooted in your essence that nothing external can pull you away from yourself. It's not about ignoring the world. It's about engaging with it from a place of peace instead of desperation. You still love, still care, still feel, but now it's balanced, whole, honest. And maybe that's the quiet miracle of this entire journey. You didn't become colder, you became clearer. You didn't lose your heart, you just stopped giving it to every hand that reached for it. There's a kind of peace that comes when you finally stop performing. When you stop explaining who you are to people committed to misunderstanding you. When you stop seeking love through proving and start honoring love through presence. It's the peace that arrives when you no longer confuse being needed with being valued. You used to equate connection with proximity, thinking closeness meant caring and distance meant rejection. But now you understand that real closeness doesn't demand constant contact. It thrives in mutual respect, in silence that doesn't feel like absence, in words that don't need to be said for truth to be known. You no longer chase after relationships that feel like maintenance. You nurture the ones that feel like peace. This is what it means to become whole, to exist without fragmentation. You don't need to hide your softness or your strength. You don't apologize for your calm, and you don't feel guilty for your quiet. You've learned that maturity isn't measured by how much you can tolerate, but by how wisely you choose what to allow. And so, life becomes simpler. Not because it has fewer challenges, but because you've stopped fighting unnecessary battles. You still face conflict, but now you meet it differently. You breathe before reacting. You pause before responding. You listen to your own intuition before anyone else's voice. That small gap, that breath, becomes sacred. It's where your power lives. You find joy in restraint. You discover strength in gentleness. You realize that true control isn't about dominating situations. It's about not letting them dominate you. There's elegance in knowing when to walk away, when to stay silent, when to let something die so something truer can be born. And that's when you start noticing how life rearranges itself around your new energy. People who once drained you begin to fade away, not because you pushed them out, but because your peace no longer feeds their chaos. The ones who remain, the few who understand the language of stillness, they become your real tribe. They don't need you to explain your boundaries. They respect them instinctively. With them, your presence feels mutual, effortless, and free. It's strange how everything you once chased now begins to find you. The validation, the respect, the calm, they appear naturally, not because you demanded them, but because you embodied them. You've become magnetic in a quiet way, grounded in authenticity. You no longer try to prove your worth. You simply live it. You notice how silence has changed for you. It's no longer something to escape. It's something to return to. It's the place where you hear your truest thoughts, where you reset your spirit, where you realize that solitude isn't loneliness, it's alignment. You no longer fear being alone because now you finally like the person who meets you there. The world still tests you, it always will, but you don't get pulled into every emotional current anymore. You've learned that not every storm requires your presence, not every message deserves your reply, and not every invitation is worth your energy. You choose your battles like you choose your peace, carefully. And when life feels heavy, you no longer collapse. You ground. You breathe. You remind yourself that everything you let go of created this very space you're standing in now. This calm, this strength, this stillness. You look back, not with regret, but with reverence, because you can see now that every loss was a lesson in return. Every silence was a mirror. Every ending was an opening. You've become unreachable, not because you built walls, but because you've grown roots. You're no longer swayed by every opinion, no longer shaken by every wave. You move differently now. Slower, deeper, more intentional. You speak less, but your words carry weight. You react less, but your presence speaks louder than ever. And in that stillness, in that quiet steadiness that no one else can see but everyone can feel, you realize something simple and profound. You are finally free.